Is there anything you would have done differently?
We reported a true story.
Our colleague Brian Williams is back in Kuwait City tonight after a close call in the skies over Iraq.
Controversial Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and questions about Kavanaugh's drinking in the past.
Sean Hannity, come on up, Sean Hannity.
Today, Andrew Cuomo is having a moment.
Hello, I am Chris Steyerwalt.
And I'm Eliana Johnson.
Welcome to the Ink-Stained Wretches, where we break down what's going wrong and what's going right with the American news media. And Eliana Johnson, we are riding a crest of breaking news, a cresting wave of breaking news with our papal conclave correspondent, my eldest man-child, a day shy of his 17th birthday, feeding me the hot information as he watches the coverage from Rome as the first American pope is crowned. Do you crown a pope? What do you do to a pope? You invest a pope?
Oh, you were asking the wrong person.
Yeah, we're going from Protestant to Jew. We're moving away from papal knowledge, but we'll keep listeners updated on what my son texts me about this matter as we record. But it's very good to be with you. It's very good to talk to you on a harried week, a busy week, but it's good to hear your voice.
Chris, I feel like we should let people know we have a short episode this week because
we'll see how short.
Okay, well, you were honeymooning and I am now traveling, so we'll be back in full force. But anyways,
well, I like you're managing the audience's expectations.
I want to manage expectations.
I did not get to honeymoon at the length that I would have wished with my beloved Jessica.
No, that was like very, very short.
It was lovely, but brief. And then I was right down to Miami to carry the message for the American Enterprise Institute to talk to the folks in the chapter down there. And I've been ping-ponging around the country, and I feel like there's a lot more of that to come. So I am glad that we are together virtually.
All right, well, let's roll. On our front page is this first American Pope crowned, elected, whatever the term is.
Popified.
I'm going to let you take this one, Chris.
First of all, Twitter is the worst, but shared with me, National Review worthy Charles C.W. Cook tweets, Trump can still be made Pope if only Mike Pence has the courage. 10 out of 10. That's a 10 out of 10. That's superb. The amount of coverage around the papal conclave. So one of the things that we know, what do the media love? Always schedulable coverage, right? Why do congressional hearings get so much more coverage than they should based on what pitiful amounts of substance come out of them? Because you can book it, you can plan it, you can assign a crew, you can build coverage around it. Elections are, of course, the ultimate expression of this. It's on the calendar 4 years in advance. You know when it's going to be. You can build your coverage around it. And the papal conclave, like the coronation of a new king or anything like that, is something that you can, it's a big news event. People do want to talk about it. You can plan the coverage. Now, that doesn't mean the coverage is going to be good. That doesn't necessarily mean the coverage is going to be good. And I give you, CBS News says Cardinals are, quote, raw dogging the conclave to elect the next pope. Let's take a listen.
So they sit the whole time? They don't stand up and
most of them will tell you that while that's going on, they're sitting reading their breviary. That's a book of prayers that clergy have, or praying a rosary, or doing the one thing we know they're not doing is checking Instagram because their devices have all been confiscated.
I believe the kids call it raw dogging it if you're going to go through a long period of time with no electronic device.
Yeah. Oh, right.
So
what do they mean by that?
Well, the term raw dogging is not one that we'll get into full exploration of in this, but it was a sexual term that was co-opted by the youth to talk about people who were not using entertainment on long flights. And the point that the good folks at CBS were trying to make was that the Cardinals were sequestered during the election process. And
Oh, okay. That's funny.
can I say, though, this is for Americans who marvel at this election and the process of it. This is, by the way, how America's political parties used to pick their presidential nominees. They would put a bunch of people in a building somewhere, a lot more than 122 cardinals or whatever it was. But they would put delegates chosen into a building, and then they would argue and vote and vote and vote until they got a choice. Sometimes you got Franklin Pierce. Sometimes you got Abe Lincoln. You weren't sure how it was going to go, but the system of a conclave is not that different from an old-fashioned political convention. And I think it's cool, and I think it's something it's fascinating to cover. And there are like 53 million probably American adults who are Roman Catholic. They're the second largest. We have no Catholic representation, I think, on this recording today, which puts us in trouble. But I say denomination. I don't know if that's an acceptable term to Catholics, but they are the second largest subgroup of American faith, the largest being evangelical Protestants that are about 23% of the country. Catholics are about 20% of the country of the adult population, and it's been consistently so for 25 years. The Catholics have maintained. The nature of who the Catholics are has changed a great deal. The Roman Catholics of the mid 20th century, late 20th century, were the grandchildren and children of first Irish, then some German, but mostly Southern and Eastern European immigrants at the turn of the century. And they were overwhelmingly Democratic. When Richard Nixon got 40% or something of the Catholic vote in 1972, it was considered astonishing because Catholics were overwhelmingly Democratic. And then the political salience dropped and the nature of Catholics in America has changed. That's a long way of saying in an earlier time in America, who the Pope was probably was more politically consequential than it is now. I don't know if it's as consequential as it is now.
Well, for sure. I mean, the Pope used to be a major geopolitical figure in a way that the Pope is not today.
Yeah, I think that, when I look at, you remember the guy Harrison Butker?
Yes.
Yes, the Kansas City Chiefs kicker.
Even I know who that is.
Who had opinions about what ladies ought to be doing. And J.D. Vance also in the same category. And a lot of them are adult converts to Catholicism. And you hear them talk about what changes they want in the Catholic Church. And I think, oh, you guys are Lutherans. You guys are Lutherans. You like the Catholicism. You like the smells and the bells and the way that the church does business and all of that stuff. But you don't like the idea of a magisterium that is undemocratic and you don't have any control over, which is sort of the Catholics' big selling point. So that's just to say, I think the American Catholic community is probably broadly reflective of the American population as a whole. And I don't think it's like it was in the 1960s or something where there was a strong political salience to Catholicism.
My only comment is that in preparation for this, I watched the movie Conclave.
How is that? I want to see it.
It was phenomenal. We really enjoyed it. So I recommend it.
Who's in that? Is it Ralph Fiennes?
Yes. Yes.
Here in a bold, don't tell Sonny Bunch, in a bold bit of cinematic critique, I'll say Ralph Fiennes is a good actor.
We really enjoyed it. So, for whatever it's worth.
And of course, Donald Trump delivers an American Pope. Trump did it, making America great again, taking over the Vatican. It's just the successes are piling up.
It's Ralph Fiennes, though.
Is there a Ralph Fiennes and a Ralph Fiennes? Are they brothers, or am I just pronouncing it wrong? It's Rafe. Oh, thank you, Colin. Yeah, I'm so cultured.
And then Stanley Tucci, and it's good.
Okay, I'll see it. I will definitely see it.
All right. We must talk about this big New York Magazine expose on John Fetterman that is primarily sourced by a former Fetterman aide by the name of Adam Gentleson, who was a
Harry Reid guy.
Aide to Harry Reid, who became Fetterman's chief of staff. And in the piece, Gentleson goes on the record essentially to say Fetterman is not mentally well. And it's a combination of implying that he's a physical danger to himself, i.e. he drives his car too fast, he's not on his medication, and that some of his ideological transformation is tied to that. And it generated a lot of controversy. So let me read a little bit from it and then we can talk about it. So the writer of this piece, Ben Terrace, says, Fetterman was, according to Gentleson, avoiding the regular checkups advised by his doctors. He was preoccupied with the social media platform X, which he'd previously admitted had been a major accelerant of his depression. He drove his car so recklessly, Gentleson said, that staff refused to ride with him. He'd also bought a gun. He says he has a biometric safe and takes all the necessary precautions, and living where he does, I understand the desire for personal protection, Gentleson wrote, referring to Fetterman's rough and tumble town of Braddock, Pennsylvania. But this is one of the things you said to flag, so I'm flagging. And this is an email that, quoting from an email Gentleson sent to Fetterman's doctors that he clearly has turned over to the reporter of this piece. What did you make of this, Chris?
So I've interviewed Fetterman a couple of times, and it's hard to tell. His affect is obviously affected by the neurological damage from his stroke, and he uses a talk-to-text app so that he can read what you're saying to him. So there's a lag in responding. And I guess I would say both things could be true. There's an AP follow-up on this that says that because of an outburst in a meeting with teachers unions, that these people are also concerned about Fetterman. And I would say that if I were Adam Gentleson or I were part of the Pennsylvania State Teachers Union, I would see lots of evidence that John Fetterman is ailing, including that he now disagrees with me on a variety of issues, including Israel, school choice. On a variety of issues, Fetterman has moved center and even right on some things, much to the dismay of many of his previous supporters when he was a Bernie progressive and who ran for Pennsylvania Senate as a bold progressive. How much of this is motivated by their disappointment in him and his politics? How much of it is sincere concern? I know that I said at the time that he continued to run after the stroke, instead of stepping aside and letting Connor Lamb go, that this seemed like a kind of a reckless choice, right? That you have suffered this massive stroke. And then when he was hospitalized for depression shortly after getting to town, you say, it seems like somebody in his life should have said, no, you got to focus on getting better. You don't need to be in the Senate. Do I think that there are people who are sincerely concerned? Yes. Do I think that there are people who are, whether they know it or not, motivated by political animus toward Fetterman, who has gone through this massive ideological and political realignment? Yes, I'm sure that's true too.
I had a couple of thoughts about this, which was Fetterman got a ton of media coverage. Okay. Like when he had the stroke, the mainstream press was not saying, oh my gosh, like this guy needs to drop out. And so many people are concerned about it. It was all, he can do it. This is so great. When he really looked like
don't be ableist. Don't be ableist. Yes.
And then that sort of coverage was tenfold when he said, I'm depressed and I'm checking myself into Walter Reed.
Why can't you let people talk frankly about mental health?
He was celebrated for that. And Gentleson himself was part of that coverage and saying, oh, I bring him his folders and his materials right into Walter Reed and he can do everything. And so, of course, the recovery for this kind of thing is long, but it does seem like the only thing that's changed in terms of the tenor of the coverage, like what accounts for the change in the tenor of the coverage, is that he's become a thorn in the side of the progressive left. The other thing that was puzzling about this is it is bizarre that a former aide would go on the record detailing all these things about somebody's like pretty private medical, details that Fetterman has been totally transparent about this stuff. He said he had a stroke. He said he needs these accommodations. He said he was checking himself into Walter Reed. Like, he's not really been hiding the ball on this stuff, or at least not seem to be. And then in the piece, like, his doctors are on the record talking about him, which also seems weird. And yeah, I'm sort of suspicious of this new line of reporting when he was just celebrated as a regular American hero.
And to be fair, I am also suspicious of the right-wingers who said that he was a drooling mushhead and had no business being in the Senate when he was a progressive. But now that he is pro-Israel, moderate, anti-protester, anti-woke, Trump meeting guy, that now he must be sane and the stroke must have helped. So I think there is motivated reasoning going on from both his critics and his supporters. But I agree with you that what Gentleson did here was pretty remarkable, or what it seemed. I didn't read closely enough to understand if there's any possibility that it was somebody other than Gentleson providing his emails to doctors to New York Magazine to do this hit piece on his former boss.
No, I mean, it's pretty clear it was mainly him. The other thing that I found amusing was Gentleson says in these emails to doctors, he outlines concerns. He eats fast food multiple times a day. We don't know if he's taking his meds. He exhibits conspiratorial thinking, like megalomania. For example, he claims to be the most knowledgeable source on Israel and Gaza around, but his sources are just what he reads in the news.
Is this Trump? Has Donald Trump taken over? He's eating fast food and claiming to know more than everybody else. Is it Trump?
And then he declines most briefings and never reads memos.
It's Trump.
High highs and low lows, long, rambling, repetitive, and self-centered monologues, lying in ways that are painfully, awkwardly obvious to everyone in the room. And my only thought was like, you're describing like 75% of politicians.
But I mean, that's a Donald Trump. That is a right on the Donald. Once you include the no briefings and fast food, I think maybe that's what happened, is that Donald Trump has inhabited the body of John Fetterman.
And the other thing I would say is that clearly, in terms of just looking at Fetterman, between the time that he was on stage debating Mehmet Oz and now, he's in a better condition now than he was then. So,
for sure.
For the right wingers celebrating him now and saying he wasn't fit then, like, they're on firmer ground than for the left saying, oh, there's something really wrong with him now, but celebrating him then. Like, when I listen to him now, it's like, oh, this guy's like tracking and he's saying things that are compelling to me, even if you may not agree with him, but like you can track him. Whereas in that debate with Oz, like it was troubling. You couldn't follow him.
Well, now he came
on stage and said, hello, good night,
Now he's got to stick the landing, right? So he's made this big move ideologically, and he's trying to stake out a space that many have tried, and I think everyone has failed to do, which is to fuse MAGA populism with a kind of progressivism. And he, we saw what he was able to accomplish in undoing. I think of all the reasons why Josh Shapiro was not Kamala Harris's running mate. Obviously, the fear of the anti-Semitism inside the Democratic Party was probably the biggest one. But Fetterman lobbied hard against him and pushed hard against him And I think Fetterman is an ambitious guy. And I think, people have already talked about Fetterman running for president in 28. And so we're going to get to see the High Wire Act, where he's won all of these new plaudits to the right. He's alienated many on the left. And now the attack on the similar grounds, right, which is cognitive fitness for office, is coming from the left instead of the right. So he's in a narrow space. It's going to be a tough tightrope to walk.
Yep. Okay. Up next.
Speaking of cognitive decline.
Exactly. We have Joe Biden
Oh,
going on The View.
And doing BBC.
And Dr. Jill. Oh, yes, we have to talk about the BBC before we talk about The View. So he's just doing a grand old media tour, which seems to me obviously pegged to the publication of these books, tracking the decline of his lucidity in the last couple years he was in office, and intended to push back on that narrative. And so on the BBC, we should play the clip of him trying to explain why he chose to seek another term in office initially.
It's a question lots of people ask you, Mr. President. Did you leave it too late? Should you have withdrawn earlier, given someone else a bigger chance?
I don't think it would have mattered. We left at a time when we had a good candidate. She was fully funded. And what happened was, I had become what we had set out to do, no one thought we could do. And become so successful on our agenda, it was hard to say, no, I'm going to stop now. I meant what I said when I started, that I think I'm prepared to hand this to the next generation. It's a transition government. But things moved so quickly that it made it difficult to walk away.
All right, so that was Biden on the BBC saying that he meant what he said. He was going to be a bridge, but then he just had too much success, and he
was too successful.
Couldn't walk away.
But how do you walk away from a series of unbroken successes like that?
And then he doubles down on The View. He is asked about the books that have written and are forthcoming about his cognitive decline. And here's what he had to say.
Mr. President, since you left office, there have been a number of books that have come out, deeply sourced from Democratic sources, that claim in your final year there was a dramatic decline in your cognitive abilities. In the final year of your presidency, what is your response to these allegations, or are these sources wrong?
They are wrong. There's nothing to sustain that, number one. Number two, think of what we were left with. We were left with a circumstance where we had an insurrection when I started, not since the Civil War. We had a circumstance where we were in a position that the pandemic, because of the incompetence of the last outfit, end up over 1 million people dying. And we're also in a situation where we found ourselves unable to deal with a lot of just basic issues, and which I won't go into in the interest of time. And so we went to work, and we got it done. And one of the things
Mission accomplished, Chris.
I mean, look, the effort from the former president is understandable, because his party has decided that they're going to heap up the blame on him and shove him off. And Joe Biden is a prideful and competitive person, the same sort of pridefulness and competitiveness that led him into the disaster of a run for a second term. And, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. The issue with Biden continues to be, though, his family. And the perfidy of Hunter Biden and his many, many abuses of his father and his father's positions. And now Jill Biden, who, look, I'm sure that she believes she's helping her husband and making him feel better because he's fighting back against what everybody's saying about him. But I believe also it would be within her to discourage this kind of behavior and let this moment pass and let history judge. And I think it is a poor reflection on the people around the president, former president, that this continues to go on. And it's sad. Joe Biden's failure of his party and the way that he ultimately failed the test put before him as president by choosing to seek another term when so many people around him knew that he should not, will be to the lasting infamy of his name, and that his wife and the people around him are not ready to say we should let this be is a real bummer.
Oh my gosh, when she's saying on The View, it's a lifestyle, it's 24 hours a day, he's like sitting there mouth agape, staring off into the distance like a vegetable. It is painful to watch. But related to this, they are digging in, and Politico reported this morning that they have hired a Democratic operative to help him defend his reputation, which is obviously what all of this is about, in the face of these forthcoming books, though Politico doesn't link it directly to that. That's obviously what it's about. And he is somebody named Chris Meagher, a former Biden deputy press secretary and Defense Department spokesperson. And it says to help him transition past the first 100 days of the Trump administration, which, I mean, that's a strange way to put it. But Meagher is obviously going to push back on the accounts offered in these books. He attacked the White House Correspondents Association's decision to bestow an award on Alex Thompson of Axios, who was covering Biden's decline. But what I found amusing about this choice is that Meagher was one of the aides to Lloyd Austin, who helped, hide the fact that he had handed over authority at the Pentagon when he went out to have surgery and didn't tell anybody, including Biden. And so he's enlisted again to do the dirty work here. And the Politico story does not note that, but I am noting it for our listeners.
Yeah. Well, you got to spend the money somewhere, I guess.
Okay, Chris, that brings us to our obsessions of the week, where we break down the items that we can't get out of our head. And I have actually been obsessing about this since Monday when the Pulitzer Prizes were announced. Did you follow this at all? Either the prizes, did you care? Are they irrelevant?
Between marrying the love of my life and going to Miami, I admit that I fell short. I did note that the Pulitzer Prize for editorial cartoons obviously went to the woman who left the Washington Post after her Jeff Bezos cartoon was refused. I could have told the day that she quit, I could have told you that she would win.
100%. Well, I'm obsessing about the Pulitzer Prize in commentary being bestowed upon somebody called a quote unquote Palestinian poet.
Oh boy.
Called Mossab Abu Toha for 4 essays in The New Yorker for, quote, the physical and emotional carnage in Gaza that combined deep reporting with the intimacy of memoir to convey the Palestinian experience of more than a year and a half of war with Israel. So this award goes out to Abu Toha, and then not 24 hours later, the Israeli organization Honest Reporting points out that, gee, did you guys know that this guy has made public statements saying that several of the Israelis taken hostages they're not hostages. And why is everybody calling them hostages? So he said of 2 28-year-old girls, women taken hostage, he said about one of them, whose name is Emily Damari, how on earth is this girl called the hostage? And these were all public, posted to his Facebook. And he objected to the media's humanization of the Israeli hostage, Agam Berger. These are the ones the world wants to share sympathy for, killers who join the army and have family in the army. And he said, these are the ones whom CNN, BBC, and the likes humanize in articles and TV programs and news bulletins. So that's bad. And it does make one wonder, A, did the New Yorker know about these statements when it published his reports? Did it know what his views were? And David Remnick, the editor-in-chief of the New Yorker, who's also a member of the Pulitzer Prize board, which decides on the winners of these prizes, did not respond to requests for comment. And it's bad if they did. It's bad if they didn't. The other interesting angle of this story is that Columbia University is they're locked in a government funding battle with the Trump administration. They're also under federal investigation for their treatment of Jewish students. And the Pulitzer Prizes are a Columbia thing. The deliberations take place on the Columbia campus. Their investments are handled by Columbia. And on the Pulitzer board, the president of Columbia University, Claire Shipman, sits on that board. The president of the Columbia Journalism School, Jelani Cobb, sits on that board. The editor-in-chief of the Columbia Journalism Review is on the board. So while the Pulitzers are a separate thing, they are also very deeply embedded in Columbia. And how this prize was awarded to this person while Columbia is locked in a battle with the administration over its treatment of Jewish students is an amazing story that I'm not sure we will ever find out the answer to, but is really something.
All right. My obsession was going to be a cool story about AI. But then I realized that my real obsession this week is how will I go on without Nate Moore, who for 3 years has been my research assistant at the American Enterprise Institute and who has helped put this podcast together and who has done so much work for all of the stuff that I do, from election night to weekly columns and notes and everything else, and done all of that. So it is time for Nate Moore to have his turn on this podcast and to be heard from. And Nate Moore, are you ready?
Thank you, Chris. I am ready.
Okay. So what do you think about journalism now that you didn't think about journalism 3 years ago?
There is a lot more stupid content out there than I ever thought there could possibly be.
Okay. In terms of media bias, do you think it's more prevalent, less prevalent? What are your insights on how media bias works now versus 3 years ago?
Ooh, I think I'm certainly much more aware of it. I'll admit I was coming out of college a bit of a bleeding heart, and a fan of Aaron Sorkin's The Newsroom and so on. And I feel like I've seen the light. I've seen the light a little bit.
Oh, Nate. Oh my gosh.
I know. Shameful admission in my last podcast.
I would have been even more skeptical of you. Okay. So more based, I guess you'd say now than before. How does your media, how will your media consumption habits be different after 3 years of doing this than they would have been otherwise?
I think it's time for a break from Twitter. I spend way too much time staring at Twitter, both for for your newsletter. So I need a bit of a detox from that. But I think I will have a more discerning eye towards the stories that you all like to talk about. So I will always be on the lookout for McDonald's content, for knockoff designer fashion, for chess cheating scandals, all the good stuff.
All of the good stuff. Eliana Johnson, do you have any questions for Nate Moore in his wretched valedictory?
Yeah, what were the best and worst parts of working for Chris?
Well, he'd buy my lunch every Thursday, so that was a real plus. We got to go to well, I guess all of us were down in Alabama for the GOP debate, which you moderated early on, and that was a real highlight. Our expeditions to the Palm took a hit when Priz started preparing for the wedding and started.
That's a great place to do meat bag diets.
Meat. Well, I promise you this, Nate. I didn't get a chance to take you out for a proper farewell lunch because of a very busy schedule. But I know you'll be back in DC from time to time, and when you are, you've got one full bore trip to the Palm coming your way. That is for sure.
Excellent. I will hold you to that.
That's for sure. And Nate, you're going. Are you prepared to tell America where you're going?
Of course. I'm headed to the West Coast to Stanford Law School. So I will get my few years in the sun. Even if I'm miserable studying torts and contracts and all that, I'll have a tan.
All right. I think you're gonna be a heck of a good lawyer, and I can't wait to see what all you do.
Thank you.
Don't disappoint us, Nate.
Yeah, don't let us down.
Try
Nate.
my best. I'll start writing in
uphold the Wretch standard.
Yeah, exactly. High bar.
It's a high bar. Well, congratulations and best of luck.
Okay, Chris, that brings us to my favorite time of the week, which is reader mail. And we have a note from Keith Morgenstern in Southern Maryland for you, Chris.
Oh,
and Eliana, okay. But mostly Chris. What is your secret meat-based weight loss program? I'm a dude who is quite carnivorous and need to lose some lbs. Please do share. Thanks. Yes, that's definitely a question for you.
I do not think that a low carb diet is right for everybody. I don't think it would be right for you, Eliana. I know that it would be, there are a lot of people for whom it would not be a good fit. But for me, it's great because I enjoy meat, eggs, and cheese. And for me, the challenge that I had always in dieting was that I always was hungry because gluttony is, of my many sins, gluttony is one of them. And the idea of having a bite of something, right? Watching Jessica have a bite of dessert and say, oh, that was so good. And then not scrape down the bowl. We went for a very nice dinner on our brief honeymoon, and I ate everything. I would have eaten, if they would have put a basket of saltine crackers on the table, and buttered saltines are delicious, but I would have eaten them all because I'm just not, impulse control is not my thing with food. And by having calorie restriction is too hard, or I failed consistently at calorie restriction, but carb restriction has a net effect of reducing caloric intake, and it just works better with my body chemistry, and I'm happy with it. So I do that, and I don't eat breakfast, and I don't eat after dinner. So once I'm done eating for the day, I don't eat anymore, and then I don't eat breakfast. I have coffee for breakfast, and then that's it. So it's basically 2 meals a day, and if I'm being really good, I'm having 20 carbs or fewer in a day. Usually miss that mark a little bit, but try to keep it there. And I've been it's been a couple years now, and more, we're going on to 3 years, and I'm very happy with it. It's true.
Okay. Well, I also like meat, eggs, and cheese. I just also like other things too.
Well, and you're better at portion control and moderation than me.
It helps to be like 5 feet tall. All right. That brings us to our favorite items of the week, where I am forced to say something nice. But Chris, you go first.
It's just a silly little thing.
So is mine.
But mine is, did you see who the favorite for the Kentucky Derby was?
I thought it was journalism.
Yes, and journalism failed. Maybe Colin, you'll play for us some of the race call when journalism blew it.
Journalism is on the move as they turn for home, and Sovereignty is coming with him on the outside. The two of them go right by with a furlong to run. Journalism and Sovereignty, nose to nose, down to the last 16th of a mile. Sovereignty has taken the lead. Journalism is second toward the inside. Baez is third, but it will be sovereignty to rule the Kentucky Derby.
So there you have it. Felt appropriate on my wedding day that the horse called journalism failed and was beaten by a horse called sovereignty, which there's a deeper metaphor here about American politics and journalism that I'm not going to get into, but it tickled me. I thought it was funny.
Chris, my favorite item of the week was play on the New Yorker did, supposedly the Intellectuals magazine did a portfolio. I guess that's a photojournalistic essay called Powerhouses Inside
Amazing.
the Living Rooms of Notable New Yorkers. And it is pretty hilarious. So one astute Twitter user, and there's one picture of Cardinal Dolan just holding a Bible, but most ridiculous is the picture of Ella Emhoff, described as a textile artist, wearing a ridiculous outfit, surrounded by all these colorful threads. But
Huma Abedin and the Soros heir.
Soros, yeah, it is pretty hysterical. But one user on Twitter noticed that Ella Emhoff has very developed calves, and said, wow, she doesn't miss leg day too much, and leg day at the gym. And the Beacon's Andrew Stiles did a very funny take on, analyzing the calves of Ella Emhoff and other celebs.
That's Steve King territory. You got to be careful. You got to be careful.
Steve King's down there. He gets a mention. He gets a mention. And an artistic rendering. So if you want to laugh, it was very amusing, and I think the response that the New Yorker deserved for this ridiculous piece.
There you go.
That is all we have for the news about the news. If you have a story you want us to talk about, email us at wretches@nebulouspodcasts.com and sign up for a newsletter at nebulouspodcasts.com. This has been Ink Stained Wretches at Nebulous Media, produced by Colin Chicola. Find us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Wretches.